Hello, this is Michael Jones coming to you from Tournament Directors Podcast with co-host Eric Slack, and we're here to talk a little bit about the brand new podcast that we're launching. This is what's known in podcasting circles as Episode Zero, and as the name suggests, it's a prelude to the actual episodes that we're going to be launching. And in it, we hope to sort of introduce ourselves, introduce the whole idea of the podcast to you, and talk a little bit about what we hope to accomplish with this and why we're doing it and why we think the industry needs it. So I'm Michael Jones, and my co-host is Eric Slack. Say hello, Eric.
Hello, Michael. How are you today?
I'm doing great. And I want to just tell the audience a little bit about myself, because it's all about me after all, let's face it. And then afterwards, if there's time, we can talk a little bit about you and talk a little bit about the show and where we're hoping to go with this thing. So I am Michael Jones, and my claim to fame in the tournament industry is that I run two websites. One is soccertournamentguide.com, and the other one is lacrossetournamentguide.com. And we hope to launch others in other sports, but we've been in this space for about 6 or 7 years now, and have always done reasonably well helping tournament directors to promote their events. We list every tournament we can find on the website. It's a great resource for coaches and team managers who are looking for events to attend. And the tournament directors love it because they know there's a huge audience of potential participants right there on the website, and they advertise through the site. They do banner advertising and email marketing and all kinds of things that we have offering. So it's just given me a really unique insight into how this industry works and what some of the things that tournament directors are facing, some of the challenges and issues that tournament directors are facing. So we came up with the idea that we would launch this podcast and interview tournament directors, many of whom we know very well anyway because we're working with them on their marketing campaigns. And that's really the thinking behind the show, that there are tournament directors out there who could use a little bit of help in terms of helping to run better events. And with that, Eric, I'm going to bring you in, and you can tell me a little bit about you and a little bit about what qualifies you to host a show about tournament directors.
Sure, Michael. Well, I think my expertise extends in a few different directions. First of all is on the content creation and sports management side. Having been in content creation, sports marketing for a little over a decade at this point. I've worked in a number of different organizations, in sports-specific organizations. I've worked with the New England Revolution. I've worked with the Manchester Monarchs. I've worked with the late Nashua Pride. So I've got some experience as far as understanding event management and working in professional sports and doing content creation, website management, all sorts of things like that. And then, specifically with soccer tournaments, having worked with Aztec Soccer as a youth coach and as an administrator. Aztec is a club here in Massachusetts, and I've been doing that for a little over 10 years. And specifically in the last 3, I've served as tournament director for the club's Labor Day weekend tournament. And having been a coach and having been a tournament director, I've seen both sides of the tournament spectrum. I've seen tournaments from the perspective of what I look for when I go to tournaments. And I've also seen a tournament from the perspective of I have to manage one, and I have to try and provide what the customers are looking for out of that tournament. So I think between all of those various duties that I've had in my professional career, certainly got what I think is a lot of good information to share, and looking forward to not only talking about my experiences, but also talking with some of the other experts out there who can let us know a little bit about what they've done and what they see as far as the world of youth tournaments, the world of tournaments beyond soccer, and just kind of getting into everything that we think tournament directors need to know, everything that directors of coaching can share about what they look for, and just seeing what is going on, what is the next evolution in the stage of tournaments, the world of youth tournaments.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, the thing that you said that is worth pointing out is beyond soccer, because we both come at this from a soccer perspective more than anything. But it's important to point out to the audience that this is more than just about soccer tournaments. There are all kinds of tournaments out there, not just team sports either. I mean, we could talk about anything from tennis to golf, individual sports like that. Cheer, some of the cheerleading tournaments out there are a pretty big deal, particularly in the South. And adult tournaments as well. It doesn't necessarily just have to be about youth sports. So there is this entire industry out there that I've become more aware of as I've gotten involved in the websites that really needs some guidance. I think the tournament directors are a fairly unique bunch, and as much as there's no actual national association, as far as I know, of tournament directors, there is not a lot of opportunity for tournament directors to interact with one another and share best practices and just generally get help from one another in how to make the events as good as possible. There is a huge range, I think, also in the industry of folks at the very top end who are running world-class events, people who run the Disney events or the Dallas Cup or major lacrosse events. And then there are amateurs, people who just do one event and they spend evenings and weekends for about 5 months of the year planning it, and then everything gets put into one event. And they're all volunteers, and those folks, I think, in particular, could really use some help from the folks who do it for a living, in terms of getting some good help and some good insights and some good ideas as to best practices. So that's really what we're hoping to do. And of course, we're going to be interviewing folks. So you've already interviewed one person. Who did you interview?
Well, I've interviewed the tournament director from Real, Colorado.
That's Cindy Thomas, right?
Yes, Cindy Thomas, correct.
I've known Cindy for years and years and years. She's been advertising on the site for, goodness, 7 or 8 years now.
Yeah, and Cindy certainly had a lot of good insight to share. I mean, she's had a lot of experience with running tournaments. They've got a pretty sizable event there that they run. That it's got a college showcase aspect to it. It's tied into the Colorado Rapids. Major portion of the event takes place around the Dick's Sporting Goods Park there. But at the same time, they were also launching a new younger team Labor Day event this year, which was going to start off a little bit smaller. So she's had that experience of being a major tournament director and then running a pretty significant event in that part of the country, and at the same time she's had the experience of trying to get a new event off the ground over what is an incredibly competitive weekend. The Labor Day tournament, I can't imagine that there's a soccer complex or any kind of complex really that's not involved with some kind of significant sporting event that's taking place over that weekend. Any kind of specific sport-specific facility that is in any way, shape, or form a decent facility really can't be sitting dormant that weekend just because of the sheer volume of kids and families, and I'm sure adults as well in some locations that are involved in some kind of sporting event that weekend. It's just a remarkable weekend as far as that kind of thing goes. So to try and start something, and I've got a little experience with this as well myself,
Sure.
To try and start something from scratch over that weekend, knowing how competitive it is, to try and give people a reason to give you their money when they've already got other choices, and to give you their time, and to trust you with their developmental plans for their kids in the case of a youth soccer tournament. It's a really daunting challenge, and I think that's something that not a lot of people really necessarily think of when they think of tournaments from the outset, is the challenge of getting it off the ground to begin with. Whether you have experience as a tournament director or whether you're somebody who's running a tournament for the first time, it's such a difficult task to try and undertake to build an event from nothing. and at one time or another, all of the events that were out there, started from nothing, and some of these have been around for a long time, certainly predating the modern internet technology age. So now, there's certainly no shortage of ways that you can get information out about your events, which I'm sure makes things a lot easier than the days when everything was paper flyers and mailers and advertisements.
I can actually remember those days.
Yeah. And now it's just that there is a lot more opportunity to promote yourself, but there also is it's a business now. It's a business, and there is a lot of people who are involved in trying to be successful in this business. So if you really want to take on the responsibility of trying to run a strong tournament, which has far more to do with the ultimate business success of the organization you're with, whether you're with a nonprofit or whether you're with a for-profit type of entity. It's a real challenge to try and make these events successful, and to make sure that you're not taking a financial bath on running these things. So when you start one up from scratch, you've got to make sure that you've got a good plan. And Cindy's certainly somebody who had that experience on both sides. Had the experience from running a long-lived event and from trying to get one started off the ground. So I think talking with people like that are going to give our audience that we hope to build some information on best practices that can be shared, and certainly there's a lot of information out there, and there's a lot of mistakes that are made, and there's a lot of good success stories about how to run these events well. And ultimately, that's what I think we want to do, is we want to be able to share stories from people who are familiar with soccer tournaments, people who are familiar with lacrosse tournaments, and people who are familiar with, as you mentioned before, tennis, golf tournaments, anything. There's so many types of sporting tournaments out there that we think that everybody who's involved with this has information that they can share, and everybody who's going to be paying attention to what we can offer here can learn from it.
Well, I agree, and one of the things that I think is unique about this industry, well, maybe not unique, but a little unusual, is that there's not a lot of cross-pollination between the various sports. So there are things that go on in the lacrosse space, for example, which don't happen in the soccer tournament space. The most obvious one is that a typical lacrosse tournament can easily cost $1,500 for a team to attend. $1,500 for a soccer tournament is a really, really expensive event. Most of them are in the $400 to $500 range. Why is that? I don't know why that is. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense in terms of major differences between the number of players, for example, the amount of space they take up, and that kind of thing that you think would affect the cost of an event. It just so happens that they have grown up with those price points. Similarly, in the soccer space, there's a very common and growing trend towards state of play policies. It's been going on for many years, and it's getting more and more popular as every year goes by. Hardly ever see it at all in the lacrosse space, and I wonder why that is. That's a very strange difference between the two. So there's a lot that can be learned if you run a lacrosse tournament and you listen to an interview by somebody who is running a soccer tournament. There's often an awful lot of information that you may not have even thought about, because you just are always in the lacrosse space and don't really actually interact that much with soccer tournaments. So it's an interesting opportunity, I think, for tournament directors from one sport to share their best practices with folks who are listening who maybe run tournaments in other sports. And the other thing we should stress, of course, we've talked about this off camera, but the value of having interviews with vendors and other industry leaders and coaches and tournament participants, people who are actually attending these events, maybe directors of coaching who are really responsible for bringing anywhere from 5 to 10 to 15 different teams to one event. What do you have to do to get those folks on your side if you're running an event? And in terms of vendors, what can you do to perhaps lower the cost of running an event by setting up special deals with vendors and things like that? So these are all folks that we're going to be interviewing as the show unfolds.
Yeah, one thing just to touch on a little bit when you talk about the lack of cross-pollination, between the sports. One of the reasons that I think that tends to take place is the competition between sports for players is pretty intense. I mean, lacrosse and soccer is an example of an area where these teams are literally competing for the same players on the boys and girls side, and they're competing directly against each other as far as the seasons where their games are played and where their events are held in most cases. I'm certainly speaking just to the region of the country, the Northeast, that I'm familiar with. Certainly don't know exactly how the calendars match up in other parts of the country, but there's no doubt that lacrosse, certainly here in Massachusetts, has grown immensely. It's become a much more popular sport here. There's a lot of kids playing it, guys and girls. At the same time, soccer has maintained a pretty strong footing here as well. Lots of girls and guys playing soccer as well. And, I wonder if there's a desire to kind of, protect your own turf, if you will, and not get involved with one another. Certainly there are some examples of some clubs, thinking of Seacoast in New Hampshire in particular, that operates across multiple sports, and there are certainly facilities that cater to multiple sports. You really can't stay in business as a facility if you don't, because you need to fill every possible hour that you can with if soccer is going to be played, soccer is going to be played. If not, let's get the lacrosse kids on there. If not, let's get the field hockey players on there. If not, I mean even frisbee.
Frisbee golf. Is that what you think?
No, not frisbee golf. Ultimate frisbee.
Oh, ultimate. All right.
Ultimate frisbee has actually gone from when I was in college, ultimate frisbee was a sport for the hippies and the stoners, and now ultimate frisbee is actually a real sport. It's funny. I remember going into Danvers Indoor Sports, which was one of the facilities where we Aztec Soccer trains, and I walk in there and there's an ultimate frisbee tryout going on, and I said, what's this for? And the guy who's running it says, this is for a professional ultimate frisbee league. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. And then I watched, and these people were in shape. They were really athletic. And, so if you think about all the growing sports that are out there and all the more traditional sports that are out there, there's certainly turf, literal and figurative turf, that these people want to protect. And I think they need. I think to really be successful, you need to get away from that. You need to look at what other people are doing and what they're finding success with as they operate their businesses, as they run their facilities, as they run their tournaments, because there are a lot of good ideas out there. And it's shutting yourself off to an idea because you're afraid that one sport's going to take away some of the kids who play the sport is just silly. You need to be doing a good job in operating your organization, operating your business, and the kids will be there. The players will come. And if you don't take advantage of a good idea that's out there, you may miss an opportunity to make your business stronger. So, hopefully we can be a vehicle that will take some ideas from lacrosse and give them to soccer, and take some ideas from soccer and give them to lacrosse, and take some ideas from the world of basketball and hockey, indoor events, and share those with the world of outdoor events, because there's certainly lessons that can be learned and shared across the boundaries of sport.
Yeah, I agree, and I think one of the aims here is to help increase the stature of the industry, because frankly sometimes you go to an event and it's not that good and you kind of regret having signed up for it, and before you know it, you're complaining to the tournament director that it wasn't really what you paid for, and often it's not out of any kind of sinister desire to rip people off or anything like that. It's just lack of experience and lack of knowledge and not really knowing exactly what needs to be done to run a successful event. So if we can provide some of that information, then I think we're doing a service to the industry generally. So that's really the thinking behind it. And I'm particularly intrigued, as I said earlier, that there are folks who really do this for a living and do it very, very well at a very, very high level. And our aim is to get some of those folks onto the show. We interviewed Scott Clayson of the National Sports Center in Minnesota. They run the Schwann USA Cup, which is one of the biggest soccer tournaments in the world. And there's no doubt that Scott can provide some insights to folks who only run one event and do it on a volunteer basis, and use up all the volunteers in the club to run that one event. Those folks can learn an awful lot from someone like Scott, who does this for a living and is very, very good at it, and brings in 1,100 teams for a week in the middle of July, in the middle of the United States. So there's definitely that kind of interaction through the show, through the podcast, of real experts, real professionals helping those folks who just do it once or twice a year. And particularly, there's a certain amount of churn in this industry as well at that level. When somebody runs a soccer tournament because their kid happens to play on the U12 boys team, and 5 years later that person's moving on because their kid is no longer a U12, in fact they're on their way off to college, and now you've got a new tournament director and they're suddenly freaked out. They think, oh my God, how am I going to do this? I've never done anything like this before, and so-and-so used to run it so well for 5 years and now I've got to take over. So those folks really do need some help, and we can hopefully provide that help through, as I say, these interviews and the magazine. We never talked about the magazine. We've got to talk about that. We're launching also, in addition to this show, we're launching an online magazine for tournament directors, iPad and tablet version. It's not going to be on print, but it's definitely going to be a useful resource for folks to learn about this industry and learn how to run tournaments and do it well and do it better than they ever thought possible. So that's the thinking behind it. Hopefully we'll offer some inspiration in addition to just information and resources, and hopefully we can create some community within the show, maybe through a private Facebook group or something like that, that we can literally have tournament directors talking to one another and offering advice and offering suggestions and sharing best practices directly with one another. So that's the plan behind it. Eric and I are the hosts of the show. We've already started to set up our first batch of interviews, and we're going to be launching very soon, and we are very, very excited about this. I think it's going to be a really great resource. So that's it. I wanted to just get this episode out so that we can at least give our prospective audience some sense of what the show's going to be about. We already have a number of episodes lined up, and we're going to be putting out a show every week from here on in. So with that, Eric, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
And we'll see you very soon in the next upcoming episode. Thanks very much for listening.